Hey everyone, welcome to the BERE News. Today we'll discuss the devastating 1918 global influenza pandemic and assess its aftermath, comparing it with the global pandemic of 2020, known as Covid-19. Hopefully this video will shed some insight into how we can move forward as an international community, learning lessons from history. In this video, we'll provide an overview of the 1918 pandemic, compare it to today's, and discuss the economic fallout of both. Make sure to watch until the end and subscribe for future videos. Let's travel back in time. The year is 1918, and World War I has been trudging along for the past 4 years across Europe. The end is near. Then, with soldiers beginning to return home, a new battlefield emerges. This one silent but deadly. From military personnel onto civilians, an H1N1 virus spreads rapidly across the world, ravaging communities in its wake. In fact, it's widely believed that World War I helped to spread the virus, since soldiers came to fight from all across the world. According to data compiled in 2007 by Thomas Garrett of the St. Louis Federal Reserve Bank, the influenza pandemic in the United States occurred in 3 waves during 1918 and 1919. The first wave began in March of 1918 and lasted throughout the summer. The more devastating second and third waves, with the second being the worst, occurred in the fall of 1918 and in the spring of 1919. According to one researcher, Spanish influenza moved across the United States in the same way as the pioneers had, for it followed their trails, which had become railroads. Then, with secure bases on both coasts, it took its time to seep into every niche and corner of America. You may know the 1918 flu pandemic by its other name, the Spanish flu. During World War I, government censors attempted to downplay the infected case numbers in most countries to keep up morale. Since Spain was neutral at the time, they were accurately reporting their cases, which made it seem like Spain was hit especially hard, thus the name Spanish flu. Between World War I and 1918 flu, which do you think caused more casualties? The answer is the flu. World War I was responsible for nearly 20 million deaths, which is a staggering number in its own regard. Some estimates show the influenza pandemic as having taken a whopping 50 million lives. Moreover, about 500 million total people were infected over the course of 2 years. By comparison with the 2020 novel coronavirus pandemic, here are the latest figures as of June 2020. Over 7 million people have officially been infected with COVID-19, resulting in over 400,000 deaths worldwide. As we all know too well, COVID-19 is destructive and has caused immense loss on a global scale. However, the figures of this pandemic pale in comparison to the 1918 flu. Just imagine if 1/3 of today's world population was infected, as was the case back then. If 500 million people were infected in 1918, then today there would be nearly 2.6 billion people infected. The good news is that hasn't happened. However, there are some similarities between the two tragic events: economic fallout. It is reported that between 1918 and 1919, business in cities across the United States was down by nearly 50%. In 1918, the Arkansas Gazette wrote, "Merchants in Little Rock say their business has decreased 40%. Others estimate the decrease at 70%. The retail grocery business has been reduced by 1/3. There has been an increase in demand for bed, mattresses, and springs. Little Rock businesses lost, on average, $130,000 per day from the lack of sales and disposing of unsold goods." In Memphis, Tennessee, the Commercial Appeal newspaper wrote, in 1918, "Coalfield, Tennessee, with a population of 500, has only 2% of well people, and 50% decrease in the production of coal by coal mining operators." One study in Thomas Garrett's paper alluded to the trend that states with larger number of influenza deaths per capita experienced higher rates of growth in per capita income after the pandemic. And 50 years after the pandemic, research found that children of infected parents were 15% less likely to graduate high school and had wages that were on average between 5 and 9% lower. Garrett's paper also made predictions about a future pandemic. He asserted, Local quarantines would likely hurt businesses in the short run. Employees would most likely be laid off. Family with no contact with the influenza may too experience financial hardships. To prevent spread, quarantines would have to be complete, no activity allowed outside of the home. Partial quarantines, such as closing schools and churches but not public transportations or restaurants, as done in Philadelphia, St. Louis, and Washington, D.C. in 1918, would do little to stop the spread of influenza. Some businesses could suffer revenue losses in excess of 50%. Knowing what we do now, clearly Garrett was good at his job and accurately predicted quarantining efforts, mass layoffs, and financial hardship. The World Economic Forum estimates that it will take nearly 3 years for the economy of the USA to recover from the 2020 pandemic. Economic growth dropped by 3% from the end of 2019 to 2020 on average across the world, according to the International Monetary Fund. Oil prices fell by 42%. Check out our video on global oil here. The IMF predicts a partial recovery in the economy in 2021 and notes that some industries have been especially hard hit by the pandemic. These sectors include tourism, airline, hospitality, ports, shipping, retail, and professional services. Unemployment rates also significantly increased to nearly 15% in the US. You can watch our video on unemployment here. What about near you? What did local measures to prevent spreading the virus look like? Has business returned to normal? Leave your answers in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video. Thanks for watching. We recommend that you check out these videos next.